had the opportunity to reach out to some global partners, specifically Neeyamo, and work with them on some projects. I mean, in the US, it's obviously been very difficult with COVID. I think that businesses are doing their best to adapt. However, depending on their industry, that looks very different for different industries, but everyone's doing their best to adapt. The major changes have definitely been more, digital processes, working from home, collaboration within teams remotely, really just moving everything to a cloud environment because for so much of the year, everyone was supposed to be staying at home. I think one of the major changes in the payroll industry has been, honestly, that all of a sudden payroll is at the forefront of business operations because there's been so many changes on the payroll front. We had different credits, leaves, loans. I mean, there were just so many things that went into payroll. So all of a sudden, this business operation that was more or less kind of operating in the background is very much at the forefront of, day to day. And people were really looking to their payroll professionals to stay on top of the changes and make sure that things are getting done correctly and that all of the applicable credits are being taken, as much as possible. My work in the payroll industry has been almost exclusively United States payroll. So it's a little bit difficult for me to compare, but I know in working with Neeyamo that the complexities that come with the US payroll are immense. We have federal regulations, and then we also have state regulations. There's different rules for overtime, minimum wages, payroll taxes, all the way down to even, the frequency that you have to pay and withhold taxes. There's different leave laws. Each state has its own regulations. So it's very complex in that if you're operating in multiple states, you not only have to know the federal laws, the laws of each state, but then also how those laws within each state and the federal law interact with each other, in the order that they take effect on your payroll operations. So I think that payroll taxes are the biggest burden when it comes to payroll in the US. As far as standout, I mean, that's really hard to say. You have, of course, federal taxes, and they have their deposit frequencies. For larger companies, a lot of times, if you're exceeding $100,000 in liability, that tax payment is due the next business day. So that's obviously, very rigorous rule. And then again, each state has its own set of rules. So when it comes to state unemployment taxes, each state has its own taxable wage base, and that gets changed every single year. Each state sets the rate for employers for state unemployment tax, and that can also change each year. There's even states like New Jersey that release unemployment tax rates in the middle of the year instead of at the beginning of each year. Then you have withholding taxes. And again, each state has a different tax rules, tax tables, depending on single, married status, head of household, how many exemptions. Some states will rely on a federal W-4. Some states have their own form for employee withholding. And then again, each state dictates how often you have to pay withholding taxes and how often you have to file withholding taxes. Then there are some states like Pennsylvania and Ohio that have local or city taxes. And so those are based on either the work location or the employee's home location or a mix of both. Then to take it one step further, Some states, or more and more frequently, states are implementing mandatory paid family and medical leave, like Washington and Massachusetts, and those are also administered in payroll. So that's a super high level overview of payroll taxes, but it kind of gives you a broad picture of the variations that you can have. So for companies looking to do business in the US, I would definitely suggest researching the payroll laws, wage and hour laws in the state that you intend on doing business in, and just making sure that you're very, very familiar with what your obligations are as an employer. There's obviously things that go above and beyond payroll when deciding where to headquarter your business, but that will obviously have a major effect, where you have employees. So definitely make sure that you research those rules, not only because you need to be in compliance and there can be severe penalties for not being in compliance, but also because you are responsible for so many things when it comes to employees and their taxes as well. So mandatory compliances for companies expanding to the US, you are going to be held to FLSA standards, which is Fair Labor Standards Act, dictates minimum wages and overtime for non-exempt employees. You'll have to know what's an exempt or non-exempt employee to make sure you classify them correctly. You'll have to know the differences between an employee and an independent contractor. You'll have to be familiar with the tax laws as it pertains to both federal and state tax compliance. There's also federally mandated leave like FMLA, where you have to give unpaid leave off to employees who qualify. Again, you have different states mandating either required paid time off or contributions to paid family and medical leave. You have to know what to withhold from employees' checks, and that would be federal and state withholding, as well as different more minimal tax laws like, again, paid family medical leave. Some states require an employee contribution to state unemployment tax like Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So again, there's just a lot out there. You really just have to be familiar with where you're doing business, where you're headquartered, and also where your employees are living and working, and making sure that you have all of your compliances in place. I think that the biggest myth about payroll is that it's easy. I think that there has been a kind of a misconception that payroll is basically data entry, entering hours into a system. And that's really just not the case. Of course, there are systems that are used to help calculate taxes and overtime and all of those things, but you still have to have someone who understands the rules and regulations to ensure that the system is functioning properly. Also, there's always an element of human error where mistakes can be made. And again, you need a professional to be able to come in and figure out, what happened and the correct way to get things processed. Payroll is anything but easy, and it requires constant attention to detail, constant learning, constantly keeping up with changes in federal and state regulations. And I think that has become more evident with everything that's happened in the last year. But payroll is definitely not an easy job and not to be taken lightly. I think that most companies choose to outsource, if not wholly, at least a portion of their payroll process. I think it would be very rare for a large company to be doing all of the calculations and tax payment deadline coordination completely manually or completely in-house. I think that most companies rely on a third party or at least a payroll system that automates and calculates a lot of the tax compliances for them. I wish there was something such as a typical work week in payroll. It can vary drastically from day to day and from week to week. Of course, your main duties of getting payroll processed are going to be dictated by your pay frequency or frequencies. If you have multiple pay frequencies, you have to get payroll processed based on your pay dates, and then you have to get all of your payroll taxes paid based on the amounts that you're withholding and the states that you're in. And then of course you have quarterly compliance. So it just depends what week we're talking about. If you're talking about January, you're going to be spending probably a lot of your time with year-end compliance, December and January. April, July, the quarter compliance months, you're going to be working on getting all of your quarterly returns filed, your 941s filed. And then, it just depends also where you are on the payroll team. If you're managing a team or if you are more on the front line of the payroll, if you're working with employees or if you're working with clients. For me in particular, I am, on the service provider side. So a lot of my time is spent working with clients and interfacing with them, setting up new clients. But again, the job can vary very dramatically depending on if you're an end user, if you're a service provider, and what time of the year it is in regards to payroll and payroll taxes. So to payroll in the US is just to constantly be keeping up with changes both at the federal and state level, and to constantly be learning. There's never a time where you're going to know everything that there is to know in regards to payroll. So it's really just a never-ending journey to be the best that you can be, learn as much as you can learn, and just help your clients solve their problems. I would just like to say, thank you to all of the global payroll professionals. The job is certainly not easy, even in good times, and it has been extremely challenging over the course of the last year plus. I think that, at least in my experience, payroll has kind of been in the background of business operations, and now it's very much in the forefront. And so I think that a lot of people are getting recognition now for the work that they're doing now, but also that they have been doing for a long time that kind of has gone unnoticed. So just, thank you to everyone out there that is doing the work and keeping all of their clients in compliance, because it's not easy.